Some secrets are so heavy, they crush the very foundation of love. And Diane Washington discovered this truth the moment she caught her husband in bed with her own daughter. The morning light filtered through the silk curtains of her Atlanta mansion like golden tears, casting shadows that seemed to whisper warnings she'd ignored for too long. Diane sat at her mahogany desk, her manicured fingers trembling as she signed the final trust documents that would protect her billion-dollar empire from predators. At 45, she'd learned that wealth attracted wolves disguised as lovers, but she never imagined the wolf would devour her own child. Her daughter Jasmine's laughter echoed from the kitchen downstairs, innocent and pure like church bells on Sunday morning. The sound pierced Diane's heart because she knew that innocence was already stolen, corrupted by the man who promised to love and protect them both. The irony tasted bitter in her mouth. She'd built an empire to secure their future, only to watch it become the very thing that destroyed their family. 5 years earlier, Diane's world was painted in different colors, vibrant with hope and the promise of new beginnings after her husband Marcus's sudden death from a heart attack. Marcus Washington had been her cornerstone, the brilliant businessman who helped transform her small catering company into a multi-million-dollar restaurant chain across the Southeast. When cancer claimed him at 52, leaving behind 17-year-old Jasmine and a grieving wife, Diane thought her world had ended. But Marcus had been wise with their investments, and his life insurance policy, combined with the business's rapid expansion, had catapulted them into billionaire status. Those first months of widowhood felt like walking through quicksand. Every step forward threatened to pull her deeper into despair. Jasmine became her anchor, the brilliant young woman with Marcus's eyes and her mother's fierce determination. They clung to each other through funeral arrangements, legal meetings, and sleepless nights when grief felt like a physical weight pressing against their chests. Little did Diane know that their bond, forged in sorrow and strengthened by shared memories, would soon be tested by betrayal so profound it would reshape their understanding of love itself. It was a Tuesday morning when fate wore a charming smile and walked into Magnolia Cafe on Peachtree Street, carrying promises wrapped in smooth words and designer cologne. Diane had been reviewing quarterly reports over her usual breakfast of peach cobbler and black coffee when she noticed him watching her from across the room. Tall, caramel skin with salt and pepper hair and eyes that seemed to hold secrets, the man approached her table with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. "Excuse me, beautiful sister, but I couldn't help noticing you're reading those numbers like they owe you money." His laugh was infectious, and despite herself, Diane found herself smiling for the first time in months. DeShawn Mitchell, he introduced himself, extending a hand adorned with gold watch that caught the morning sunlight. "And you must be the queen running this empire, because ain't no way someone that fine is just playing with pocket change." His compliment felt like warm honey after years of cold loneliness, and Diane discovered that her heart, what she thought had been buried with Marcus, was still capable of quickening at a stranger's touch. She didn't know then that some strangers come bearing gifts that cost more than money. They cost souls. Love arrived disguised as salvation, sweeping Diane into a whirlwind romance that felt like stepping into sunlight after years of winter. DeShawn courted her with the patience of a man who understood that broken hearts needed gentle handling. He brought her wildflowers instead of expensive bouquets, claiming real beauty don't need artificial enhancement. Their dates were simple but thoughtful. Walks through Piedmont Park, jazz concerts at the Fox Theater, Sunday brunches where he listened intently as she shared dreams about expanding her business internationally. He never pushed for intimacy, never demanded more than she was ready to give. And gradually, the walls around Diane's heart began to crumble like sugar and rain. 3 months into their courtship, Diane finally spoke the words that had been dancing on her tongue. "DeShawn, I have something important to tell you. I have a daughter. She's 19 now, just started at Spelman College." She watched his face carefully, waiting for the subtle shift that often came when men realized she carried the responsibility of motherhood. Instead, DeShawn's smile widened. His eyes lightened up like Christmas morning. Baby, that just makes you more beautiful to me. Any woman who raised a child while building an empire deserves nothing but respect and love. His response felt like a blessing, and Diane allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, God was giving her a second chance at happiness.
The introduction happened on a golden September afternoon when autumn was just beginning to paint Atlanta in shades of amber and crimson, and the air held promises of new beginnings. Diane had chosen her favorite restaurant, Azure on the Boulevard, for the meeting between DeShawn and Jasmine. Her daughter arrived first, stunning in a burgundy dress that complemented her cocoa skin and inherited her father's intelligent eyes. At 19, Jasmine possessed that rare combination of youthful beauty and old soul wisdom that came from losing a parent too young. When DeShawn walked in, his reaction was immediate and unsettling. His eyes widened with an appreciation that lingered too long, and his smile carried undertones that made Diane's stomach tighten with unspoken concern. "Lord have mercy," DeShawn whispered, loud enough for both women to hear. "Your daughter is as beautiful as you are, Diane, maybe even more so." He took Jasmine's hand and held it longer than appropriate, his thumb tracing across her knuckles while his eyes seemed to memorize her face. Jasmine blushed, clearly flattered by the attention, while Diane felt something cold and sharp twist in her chest. Later she would remember this moment as the first crack in her perfect fairy tale, the subtle warning her intuition screamed but her heart refused to acknowledge. Love, she was learning, could make even the wisest woman blind to the obvious dangers standing right in front of her. 6 months later, wedding bells rang across St. Philip's Cathedral, while angels seemed to weep tears of foreboding disguised as spring rain. The ceremony was everything Diane had dreamed of. Hundreds of roses, a gospel choir that made the sanctuary walls tremble with praise, and a reception where Atlanta's elite celebrated what appeared to be a perfect union. Jasmine served as maid of honor, radiant in pale pink silk, while DeShawn's groomsmen, men Diane barely knew, whispered among themselves with knowing looks that made her briefly question if she truly understood the man she was marrying. But when DeShawn lifted her veil and whispered, "You saved my life, beautiful," all doubts melted like snow in Georgia sunshine. The honeymoon period lasted exactly 3 weeks. That's how long it took for DeShawn's charm to crack and reveal the calculating stranger underneath. It started with small comments about the size of their Buckhead mansion, casual inquiries about her investment portfolio, and pointed questions about the trust Marcus had established. When Diane mentioned that her assets were protected by ironclad legal documents her team of lawyers had crafted, DeShawn's smile never wavered, but something dangerous flickered behind his eyes. "Baby," he said, pulling her close while his fingers dug slightly too hard into her waist, "we're married now. Your money is our money. That's how this works." Money became the new battlefield where love was sacrificed on the altar of greed, and Diane found herself fighting a war she never saw coming. It started innocently enough. DeShawn's wallet had been stolen during a business lunch, and he needed to use her American Express for a few days. Those few days stretched into weeks, then months, as charges piled up like autumn leaves, expensive dinners at restaurants where Diane wasn't invited, shopping sprees at men's stores in Lenox Square, and mysterious cash advances that DeShawn claimed were for investment opportunities. When the monthly statements arrived showing $50,000 in charges, Diane confronted him with the controlled fury of a woman who'd built an empire through careful financial planning. "DeShawn, baby, we need to talk about these credit card bills," she said, spreading the statements across their kitchen island like evidence in a courtroom. His response was swift and manipulative, arms wrapped around her from behind, lips against her neck, voice dripping with wounded innocence. "Diane, sweetheart, I'm your husband. I'm trying to build something for us, for our future. But if you don't trust me," his words trailed off with the practiced pain of a man who'd learned to weaponize emotion. When she explained that her inheritance was locked in trust funds, specifically designed to prevent spousal access, DeShawn's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold calculation beneath before snapping back into place with a smile that no longer reached his eyes. Like a predator circling wounded prey, DeShawn's attention shifted from the protected mother to the vulnerable daughter with surgical precision. "Tell me about Jasmine's situation," he asked one evening while they sat on their marble-floored sunroom, Atlanta's skyline twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. His tone was casual, but Diane noticed how he'd positioned himself to study her reaction in the reflection of the glass. What kind of inheritance did Marcus leave for her? The question hung in the air like smoke, acrid and warning, but Diane answered truthfully. Jasmine would inherit $10 million on her 21st birthday, currently held in a trust that generated enough interest for her college expenses and a comfortable living allowance. When DeShawn's interest in Jasmine became suddenly intensely paternal, he offered to drive her to college when Diane was busy with business meetings. He remembered her favorite foods and would arrive home with treats from her preferred bakery. He listened intently when she talked about her psychology studies, offering encouraging words about her intelligence and beauty with a frequency that made Diane's maternal instincts prickle with unease. But when she mentioned her concerns to Jasmine, her daughter laughed them away. "Mama, you're being paranoid. DeShawn's just trying to be a good stepfather. Isn't that what you wanted? Someone who would care about both of us?" The innocence in those words would later haunt Diane's dreams, a reminder of how easily trust could be manipulated by those skilled in deception. Evil rarely announces itself with horns and pitchforks. Instead, it arrives wearing the mask of comfort and speaking the language of understanding hearts. It began on a rainy Thursday evening in November when Jasmine came home from college with tears streaming down her face like broken pearls. Her boyfriend of 8 months, Trevor, had ended their relationship via text message, a cowardly goodbye that shattered her young heart into pieces small enough to slip through her fingers. Diane was at the office handling a crisis with their Birmingham location, leaving DeShawn to comfort the sobbing 19-year-old who had always been protected from the cruelest realities of love's betrayals. "Come here, beautiful girl," DeShawn whispered, opening his arms to Jasmine as she collapsed on their living room sofa. What started as paternal comfort slowly transformed into something darker, more dangerous. His hands lingered on her back longer than appropriate. His whispered assurances carried undertones that made her confusion deepen rather than her pain lessen. When his lips first touched hers, Jasmine's world tilted on its axis. This was wrong, forbidden, but the pain in her chest made her crave any comfort, even comfort wrapped in betrayal.
Some sins leave stains that no amount of prayer or tears can wash away, and that November night painted both their souls with guilt that would fester like untreated wounds. The seduction unfolded with the systematic precision of a man who'd planned every word, every touch, every manipulation. DeShawn's hands traced Jasmine's tears away, while his voice painted pictures of her beauty, her worth, her right to be cherished by someone who truly understood her value. "Your mama's at work again, baby girl. She's always at work. But I see you. I see how special you are, how much you need someone to love you the way you deserve." His words were poison disguised as medicine, each syllable designed to exploit her heartbreak and her lifelong need for masculine approval that had been stolen when her father died. When Jasmine woke up in her childhood bedroom the next morning, shame covered her like a suffocating blanket. The physical evidence of their betrayal stained her sheets, but the emotional devastation cut deeper than any physical wound. DeShawn found her there, sitting in the window seat where she'd once read fairy tales about princes and happy endings, and his manipulation continued with practiced ease. "This stays between us, beautiful. Your mama wouldn't understand. She's too focused on her business to understand real love. But what we shared was beautiful, natural. Don't let anyone make you feel ashamed of something so pure." His words were lies wrapped in silk, and somewhere deep in her wounded heart, Jasmine knew it. But the alternative, facing her mother's disappointment and the destruction of their family's fragile happiness, seemed impossible to bear. Truth has a way of revealing itself in moments of anger, when carefully constructed facades crumble and expose the rotting foundation beneath. The argument started over something trivial, DeShawn's expectation that Diane should give him access to her business account so he could help manage their finances. But trivial seeds can grow into mighty storms when planted in soil already poisoned by deception and watered by mounting frustration. Diane stood her ground with a steel backbone that had carried her through widowhood and business battles, explaining once again that her lawyers had structured her assets to protect them from anyone, including spouses, who might have ulterior motives. "You don't trust me," DeShawn shouted, his careful composure finally shattering like expensive crystal hitting marble floors. "I married you. I put up with your controlling ways. I even put up with your spoiled daughter. And this is how you repay me?" The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made Diane's blood freeze in her veins. Put up with Jasmine? What does that mean, DeShawn? But his response cut through her heart like a blade dipped in acid, each syllable designed to exploit her heartbreak and her lifelong need for masculine approval that had been stolen when her father died. A mother's heart knows when her child is in danger, even when that danger wears the face of family and speaks the language of love. That night, Diane lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her bedroom, her mind replaying DeShawn's words like a broken record stuck on the most painful song. She knows how to make a man feel wanted. The phrase echoed in her consciousness, each repetition adding weight to suspicions she'd tried desperately to ignore. Beside her, DeShawn slept peacefully, but his presence felt like sharing a bed with a coiled serpent, beautiful and dangerous, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The next morning brought new revelations wrapped in innocent observations. Jasmine had been different lately, quieter, more withdrawn, jumping at sudden noises and avoiding eye contact during family dinners. Her appetite had disappeared and dark circles shadowed her once bright eyes like purple bruises on her soul. When Diane tried to engage her in their usual mother-daughter conversations, Jasmine would deflect with forced smiles and quick subject changes. "I'm just stressed about finals, Mama," she'd say, but her voice carried the hollow ring of someone practicing lines for a play she never auditioned for. Diane's maternal instincts, honed by 19 years of reading her daughter's moods and needs, screamed warnings that something was terribly, irreversibly wrong in their carefully constructed new family dynamic. Sometimes God arranges circumstances to reveal truth that has been hidden in shadows. And that Tuesday afternoon, divine intervention came disguised as a canceled business meeting. Diane had planned to spend the entire day in Savannah, meeting with potential investors for her restaurant expansion. But when the key investor called that morning with a family emergency, the meeting was postponed, leaving her free to return home earlier than expected. As she drove through Atlanta's afternoon traffic, something pulled her toward home with unusual urgency, a maternal instinct that whispered warnings she couldn't quite name but couldn't ignore. The house felt different when she entered through the garage, charged with an energy that made her skin prickle with unease. DeShawn's car was in the driveway, but he told her he had client meetings all afternoon. Jasmine should have been at her evening psychology class, but her backpack sat abandoned by the front door like evidence of interrupted plans. Diane moved through her own home like a stranger, each familiar space feeling contaminated by secrets that seemed to pulse from the very walls. The silence was wrong. Not peaceful, but heavy with guilt and shame that hung in the air like humidity before a storm.
Stolen her daughter's innocence in the very bed where love once lived. Diane's feet carried her up the curved staircase toward Jasmine's room as if pulled by invisible strings, each step echoing like a death knell in the marble foyer below. The door stood slightly ajar, and through the crack she could see movement, hear sounds that made her stomach twist with a combination of confusion and dread. When she pushed the door open, the scene before her destroyed every remaining piece of her carefully reconstructed world. DeShawn and Jasmine, naked and intertwined on the bed where Diane had once read her daughter bedtime stories and kissed away childhood nightmares. Time stopped. The earth ceased its rotation. Breath abandoned her lungs as if her body had forgotten how to sustain life in the face of such devastating betrayal. Jasmine's eyes met hers first, wide with shame, terror, and a heartbreak so profound it seemed to age her 10 years in an instant. DeShawn turned more slowly, and the expression on his face wasn't remorse or surprise, but rather the cold satisfaction of a predator whose trap had finally been sprung. "Diane," he said, his voice steady as if he'd been caught reading a newspaper instead of reaping her daughter's innocence. "We can explain this." But no explanation could heal what had been shattered. No words could rebuild what had been destroyed in that single, soul-crushing moment of discovery. When worlds collapse, they don't fall gently like autumn leaves. They shatter like glass, leaving jagged pieces that cut everyone trying to clean up the devastation. "What happened here?" Diane's voice emerged as a whisper, barely audible above the sound of her heart breaking into pieces small enough to disappear completely. Jasmine scrambled for her clothes, tears streaming down her face like rivers of shame, while DeShawn made no effort to cover himself, as if his nakedness was a weapon he wielded with pride. "Mama, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," Jasmine sobbed, her words punctuated by hiccups that made her sound like the little girl she'd been before this monster destroyed her childhood forever. DeShawn's response revealed the depth of his manipulation with surgical precision. "She came to me, Diane. She was crying about that boy who broke her heart, and one thing led to another. You can't blame a man for responding to a beautiful woman who knows how to appreciate him." His words were calculated to wound both women simultaneously, painting Jasmine as a seductress while criticizing Diane as an inadequate wife. But then came the line that revealed his true nature. "Besides, she'll inherit more money than you'll ever give me access to. At least one woman in this family knows how to share." The casual admission of his mercenary motives, the reduction of their family's love to mere financial transactions, finally showed Diane exactly who she'd married. Not a man seeking love, but a predator hunting fortune. Billionaires don't survive by accident. They survive by building walls so high and deep that even the most determined enemies can't breach them. And Diane's walls had been crafted by the finest legal minds money could buy. "You think you're entitled to my money because we're married?" Diane's voice gained strength as her shock transformed into the cold fury of a businesswoman who'd fought bigger battles than this pathetic man's greed. "Let me educate you about something, DeShawn. My lawyers didn't just protect my assets from gold diggers, they protected them from predators like you. The prenuptial agreement he'd insisted on not signing had been irrelevant from the beginning. Her trust structure was so sophisticated that marriage itself provided no legal pathway to her wealth." The revelation hit DeShawn like a physical blow. His face contorted with rage as he realized his months of manipulation, his careful seduction of both mother and daughter, had been for nothing. "Those trust documents you signed so casually last year," Diane continued, her voice gaining power with each word, "they specifically excluded spousal access. My team of lawyers anticipated men exactly like you, charming predators who hunt vulnerable widows and their children. You played yourself, baby. The legal fortress she'd built wasn't just about protecting money. It was about protecting her daughter's future from exactly this kind of devastation.
But even the best legal protections couldn't repair the damage already done to Jasmine's heart and soul. Justice doesn't always wear a black robe and carry a gavel. Sometimes it arrives wearing designer suits and carrying briefcases filled with evidence that can destroy a predator's life as thoroughly as he destroyed his victim's innocence. Within hours of the discovery, Diane's phone calls mobilized an army of protection that money and influence could command. Her head of security, Marcus Thompson, a former FBI agent who'd been protecting her family since her husband's death, arrived with a team that swept the house for evidence while DeShawn was forced to pack his belongings under armed supervision. "Ma'am," Marcus said quietly, his professional demeanor not quite hiding his personal outrage. "We found cameras. Hidden cameras in your daughter's bathroom, her bedroom. This has been planned for months." The private investigators Diane employed uncovered DeShawn's real history like archaeologists excavating a tomb of horrors. His real name was DeShawn Williams, and he had a criminal record spanning 3 states, fraud, identity theft, and 2 previous marriages to wealthy widows who lost hundreds of thousands before discovering his true nature. The man she loved, the man she trusted with her daughter's safety, was a professional predator who specialized in hunting grieving families. Mrs. Mitchell, her lead attorney, Patricia Williams, explained during an emergency meeting, "We have enough evidence to ensure he never hurts another family, but Jasmine will need to testify about what he did to her." The legal path forward was clear, but the emotional journey would be treacherous for everyone involved. Healing from betrayal is like learning to breathe underwater. It seems impossible until you discover you're stronger than the pain trying to drown you. Jasmine's therapy sessions became sacred ground where truth could be spoken without shame and healing could begin its slow, painstaking work. Dr. Angela Roberts, a trauma specialist who'd helped many young women recover from similar violations, created a safe space where Jasmine could unpack the manipulation and grooming that had led to her victimization. "He told me Mama didn't love me enough, that she was too busy with work to see how special I was," Jasmine whispered during one session, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "He made me feel like he was the only one who truly cared about me." The revelation that she'd been systematically groomed rather than seduced provided both relief and new pain. Relief that she wasn't responsible for the betrayal, but pain at recognizing how thoroughly she'd been manipulated by someone who studied her vulnerabilities like a predator studies prey. Diane attended many of the sessions, learning how her own grief and busy schedule had created opportunities for DeShawn's manipulation. "Mama," Jasmine said during one particularly breakthrough session, "I don't blame you. He was a professional liar. He fooled both of us." The forgiveness in her daughter's eyes was more precious than all the money in Diane's accounts, a reminder that some treasures can't be bought or sold, only earned through love and patience. Truth has a way of cornering liars in courtrooms where charm and manipulation can't save them from the weight of evidence and the testimony of their victims. The trial was a media sensation. Billionaire widow, predatory husband, and a young woman brave enough to speak her truth in front of cameras and strangers. DeShawn's defense attorney tried to paint him as a victim of female manipulation, claiming that both Diane and Jasmine had seduced him for their own purposes. But the evidence was overwhelming. The hidden cameras, the pattern of previous victims, the financial records showing his systematic attempts to access family money, and most damaging of all, recorded conversations where he'd bragged to associates about his long-term investment strategy. When Jasmine took the stand, her voice rang with the strength of a survivor rather than the whisper of a victim. She told me that my mother would never understand our special connection. She told me that I was more beautiful than her, more understanding, more worthy of love. He used my grief over my father's death and my boyfriend's betrayal to make me feel like he was the only one who truly cared about me. Her testimony, delivered with quiet dignity and unflinching honesty, destroyed any pretense that DeShawn's actions had been motivated by love rather than calculation. When the judge sentenced him to 15 years for fraud, theft, and sexual assault of a minor, Diane felt something she hadn't experienced in years: complete, soul-deep satisfaction. Sometimes the most beautiful flowers grow from the richest soil fertilized by pain, watered by tears, and cultivated by the unbreakable bonds between mother and daughter. 2 years after the trial, Diane and Jasmine stood together in the newest location of their expanded restaurant empire. This one specifically designed as a training ground for young women seeking careers in hospitality management. The Diane Washington Center for Women's Empowerment represented more than business expansion. It was healing transformed into purpose, pain alchemized into power that could protect other young women from predators who hunted the vulnerable. "Mama," Jasmine said as they watched a group of trainees practice presentation skills, "do you think Daddy would be proud of what we built from all this mess?" Her question carried the weight of someone who'd learned that strength could be forged in the fires of betrayal, that love could survive even the cruelest violations when it was built on foundations deeper than circumstance. Diane wrapped her arm around her daughter, marveling at the woman she'd become, scarred but not broken, wounded but not defeated, wiser for having survived what should have destroyed them both. "Baby girl," she whispered, her voice carrying all the love and pride that money could never buy. "Your daddy always said that Washington women don't just survive storms, we learn to dance in the rain. And look at us now, teaching other women to dance too." Their empire had been built twice now, once on dreams and determination, and once on the ashes of betrayal transformed into triumph. Both foundations proved equally strong, equally capable of supporting a legacy that would outlast any predator's temporary